For over 2 decades, the Toyota Prius has been unanimously known as being one of the forerunners of electrification in mass-produced automobiles. But to a lot of car people like you and me will know that the Prius has always been pretty dull and drab if you at least a little bit care about driving. Today, let's take a look at Toyota's Prius with a plug, the Prius Prime, which touts up to over 50 miles a gallon, depending on what model you get, 40 miles of electric range, and it's the fastest Prius to date. This Prius in particular is a 2023 Prius Prime in cutting edge. It is a nice color, a very neutral color, but it is just silver. I was actually hoping that Toyota would offer this in yellow like the press pictures, but it isn't offered in yellow. This morning I actually got an email from Toyota releasing the 2024 Prius Prime, which remains unchanged. So this video also thankfully applies to the new model. This one has a few options on it, like the solar charging roof, heated rear seats, the panoramic view monitor with the self-parking, and a bunch of other things that bring the $39,000 MSRP of an XSE Premium to $43,000 as this tested model over here. Your ears are not deceiving you. This one does have a solar charging roof. It doesn't do that much, so I myself would just keep the pano moonroof option. But this roof is able to charge the EV battery, not by a lot, but whenever you're in the sun, you do get a little bit of charge. And this can also help power auxiliary electronics while you're driving your Prius Prime. But it doesn't do that much. I would still just plug it in. So I'm actually driving right now, but we're gonna do a bit of an experiment. I'm about to film my friend Lewis's RAV4, which you can check out that video up here. But while I film the RAV4, I'm gonna have this thing park in the sun, and we're gonna see if that solar roof actually does anything. Now I'm sitting directly in the sun. I'm about to leave this car for a few hours. So you can see actually here, just on my drive, I've actually gained 2 miles, and you can see the state of charge. Not a cloud in the sky. So it should be a pretty good test, but we shall see in a few hours' time. So it's been about 2 hours later, maybe 3 hours, and the car, you can see, oh yeah, it's 109. And now we shall see how much battery the solar has given us. Oh, I'm still at 2 miles, and it's still at about a quarter full. The solar charger is supposed to work all the time. It's generated 105 watts. So I don't know if that really means anything. But it's the most it's generated in a little while, so you can see that it's actually been in the sun. But yeah, I still only have 2 miles of range. That's okay though. If you don't care about all the bells and whistles and you just want a fuel-sipping Prius, Toyota does offer the Prius Prime in 3 different trim levels. We start at the SE, which is about $32,000, and that's what gives you that 52 mile per gallon combined rating and 44 miles of electric-only driving. Then we move to the XSE, and then the XSE Premium, like this one, that starts at $39,000, and that takes place of the normal Prius Limited. And if you're still looking for a cheaper Prius, Toyota still offers the normal hybrid Prius without a plug at about $27,000. Since this is our first time looking at this new Prius, I did want to talk about it a little bit. I actually quite like the look. It reminds me a lot of the Model 3, especially if you get an SE, because it really looks like an egg. This one looks like an egg, but at least it's a little bit sporty. You may be wondering, what's the difference between a normal Prius and the Prius Prime? And it really has to do with the powertrain, because Toyota really is very excited, and I am actually quite excited and moved by this powertrain as well. It's really crazy to think that we are now on the 5th generation of Toyota's hybrid setup, and I think it's the 2nd or third generation of the plug-in hybrid in a Prius. This is a 2-liter dual overhead cam gas 4-cylinder, and it's paired to 2 electric motors and an electronic CVT. Power only goes to the front wheels in the Prius Prime. For some reason, I thought these would come in all-wheel drive. Hopefully we'll see that one day, but total system output is 220 horsepower. That's the most out of any Prius in existence, at least any factory Prius in existence. The Prius Prime uses a 13.6 kilowatt hour battery pack, and this whole package combined gets this 3,500 pound egg to 60 miles an hour in a record-breaking 6.5 seconds. That is why this is the fastest Prius to date. In terms of fuel economy for this XSE Premium, because it has the larger 19-inch wheels, MPGs are 50 in the city, 47 on the highway, and a combined rating of 48. Those are still great numbers, but if you really want maximum efficiency with your Prius Prime, I would definitely go for the SE. Now, when it comes to charging and fueling your Prius, it's actually very easy and effortless. This has a 10.6 gallon fuel tank, which isn't that big, but if you want to use the maximum efficiency of your Prius Prime, I definitely recommend charging it. Thankfully, Toyota includes the Prius Prime with a level 1 charger that uses 110 volts, and that gets this thing to a full charge from empty in about 11 hours. Toyota also allows you to use a level 2 charger, or 240 volts, to charge this in about 4 hours time. If you're unable to recharge your Prius Prime, you don't have to worry about range anxiety either, because your Prime will default to hybrid mode and use the gas engine and the electric motor in conjunction to power your Prius Prime. Now, to add to the new age theme of this new age Prius, Toyota offers 2 distinct wheel options based on trim level. Base SE trims will get 17-inch wheels with Aero-style hubcaps. XSE and XSE Premium will get these larger 19-inch wheels, which do impede in efficiency just a little bit, but they make up for it with how they look. I actually really like how these wheels look, and they really enhance the design of this longer, lower, and wider Prius. Now, one of the reasons that I think this is one of the best daily drivers out there is because of the practicality, in addition to the efficiency of it. Of course, with this XSE Premium, you get a power tailgate, which is very fancy for a Prius, but remember that this is egg-shaped or cheese wedge-shaped, so there's not an extreme amount of space back here. 20.6 cubic feet of volume with the second row seat up. You also get this built-in tonneau cover that you can remove pretty easily as well. But if you want to drop the second row seat down, you get 26.7 cubic feet of volume. That's not huge, but it actually is a pretty usable amount of space. There's also a 150 watt power outlet back here, and the 12-volt car battery is actually in the trunk. I think that's pretty important to know. Underneath the floor is just enough space for the charger itself and a can of Fix-A-Flat, so don't expect a spare tire in your Prius Prime. I would also not advise to tow with it. You could probably put a hitch on it for a bike rack, but that's all. Another thing, the button that activates the trunk to close and also lock, if you just stand by it, it's not going to do anything. You have to walk away. Isn't that neat? A power trunk on a Prius as well, but the only thing I will say, no rear wiper. I do have to say, and I know I'm rambling a little bit, I know the rear wiper in the Prius has always been kind of useless, but it is a novelty. Now, before you even get inside your Prius Prime, you'll notice, and also on the normal Prius, the rear door handles are hidden. I actually quite like how that looks, but as we get inside, things are actually pretty nice back here. This is actually the first time that I've gotten back here, but I'm actually impressed. The door closes with a nice solid thunk. I do have to say material quality in the back is okay, just hard touch materials all throughout the door panel, except on the armrest itself, thankfully, but everything else is hard touch plastic. For as cheese wedge shaped as this thing is, I actually have a surprising amount of space. I'm 5'9", and the driver's seat is in my position. I can fit my feet mostly under the seat, and I have decent legroom, about 2 inches, and I'm actually pretty comfortable. The seat itself is comfortable, headroom is good. I mean, if you're anything taller than me, you probably won't fit back here because I have a hand thick of headroom, so really not that much. If you're 6 foot tall, you won't fit back here. Thankfully, the seat is very comfortable though. It's very soft and cushy. It's Toyota's Softex material that feels actually pretty decent. In terms of creature comforts back here, this one has the optional heated rear seats. This also has 2 USB Type-C ports for the rear passengers and a 120 volt power outlet. There's plenty of latches for child seats, and also if you drop the armrest, it's reasonably soft with 2 shallow cup holders, pretty standard for the course, but there's 2 bottle holders in each of the rear doors as well. Getting into the front seat is an easy feat as well. Of course, this is a pretty low car, so you do kind of fall into it, but it's not that low. And as I close this door, still a nice solid thunk. Of course, it's not going to be Lexus solid, but it's pretty good. Because this fall summer is actually coming in hot, I'm going to start this thing and turn the AC on. But this is the key for the Prius Prime, Toyota's new design key, but on the back side it does say Prius Prime on it. But because it's a push button, as all of these are, you put your foot on the brake and press the power button to go. In the week that I've been driving this thing, I have really come to love the interior of this, especially compared to older Priuses. I've not been that crazy about old Prius interiors, but this actually feels pretty nice inside. It feels like 40 grand. You have a 3-spoke leather-wrapped steering wheel with red stitching. Everyone will have this red trim on the dash and also on the seats as well. I guess you could say it's a bit sporty. But the wheel itself feels pretty nice. It's small, so it's nice to turn and flick in the hand. But there's a bunch of buttons on it. At first it was a little bit too much, but now I'm used to it. The left side, those buttons control the volume and audio controls and also some of the information on the gauge cluster. And let's listen to the horn. This has a weak horn, but on the right side of the wheel we have a lot of our cruise control functions and some audio controls on the very bottom as well. You can also notice that the headlights on this are automatic, as well as the wipers on this model. This car also has a driver attention monitor that a lot of newer Toyotas and Lexuses have been getting. There are a bunch of buttons on the left side of the wheel, some memorable ones. This has a heated windshield element, also a heated steering wheel button, and the button to turn the outlet on in the back seat is in the front as well. Material quality up here feels better than the rear seat, and I appreciate that because of course you're sitting up here more. It's not like luxury feeling material, but at least it's softer touch than the rear seat. The armrest is pretty soft as well. The lower part of the door panel is hard touch, but everything in here feels pretty nice. In this XSE premium model, you have 2-person memory for the driver's seat and also the mirrors, but the steering column is only manual tilting and telescoping. All 4 windows are auto up and down in this as well. I really like that. As we look up at the gauges, they're very Prius-like. The whole interior is very Prius-like, especially if you're coming from an older one. But the gauges kind of eliminate the purpose of a heads-up display because it's still up high. I did have to get used to how the steering wheel adjusts because at first the wheel was actually in the way of the gauges. If you push the little menu button on the steering wheel, it'll go through Toyota's basic gauge information display. There's not a lot to them, but it does provide a good amount of information. As we look at the center display, this uses Toyota's new 12.3-inch display. It is touchscreen, thankfully, and it supports wired and wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But this does also use Toyota's connected services system, which the screen itself is very quick and responsive. I like how snappy everything is. It only takes a little bit of time for things to boot up first thing in the morning, but that's the only time that I notice it. Otherwise, I just use CarPlay most of the time anyway. But again, I just wish that it had a dedicated home screen for if you're using this without CarPlay. On the right side of the screen, Toyota does provide a volume knob, but if you're just sitting normally like me And I feel like if you're shorter than me, it would be more of a problem. You have to reach a little bit for the volume knob. Not too much, but you just have to reach a little bit. Underneath the infotainment screen, we have single zone automatic climate control. I really like how all the buttons have been simplified in this one, but they didn't get rid of all the buttons in this, and you don't have to rely on the screen to change your climate. You can also see the heated and ventilated seat controls as well. Underneath that, there's two USB Type-C ports. One is for data and charging, and one is just for charging. And also there's a normal power outlet as well, thankfully. And underneath that is a little tray where you could put your phone or your keys or whatever. But there's actually a hidden compartment underneath this tray, which is actually removable as well. So it makes it pretty easy to clean. Or if you just want the deep console, you can have that as well. Behind that little console, there's two reasonably sized cup holders wrapped around a bunch of piano black. There's not a lot of piano black in this, but I just don't like piano black at all in cars because I already cleaned this for before this video, and there's smudges on it, there's dust on it. It just gets too dirty too fast. If you're used to Priuses, the shifter design is pretty much the same. It is a little bit more modernized, but that's all. Behind that is the drive mode selector, which you can tell a difference between what drive mode you're in. Not a huge difference, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. There is a wireless charger, and I find it very interesting where Toyota put the charger on the side here, and you can actually just drop your phone inside like that. As we look at the center armrest, it's pretty soft, reasonably comfortable, and the center console is, it's on the small side, but all the storage around the car makes up for it, and there's also two more USB Type-C ports for charging. Now we can focus on the seats. They're very comfortable, especially if you're driving this all day long. I've actually really liked the seats in them because the Softex material is quite soft. These seats are heated and ventilated as well, and I really have to say these are some of the best ventilated seats I've experienced. The driver's seat features 8 ways of power adjustment with 2-way lumbar, but the passenger seat is fully manual. As we look up, this has an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, and it also has a digital rear-view mirror as well, which makes it very nice because visibility in the back of the Prius, if you turn around, isn't that ideal, so this really helps a lot. Something that also really helps a lot is the amount of cameras in this car as well. You can see this has a 360 view camera and also a backup camera with 2 different views, a normal view and a wide view. There's also various guidelines that are very helpful. When you put the car into drive, you can see a front view camera, and you can also change how wide or how close you can see that front view. And also you can change the guidance lines for those as well. But this camera is extremely intuitive. This also allows you to look at what's underneath your Prius. Once you start moving, you can actually see that the camera's stitched together an underbody camera, which is very interesting. And you can find it on some other Toyota products as well. That's something that's very handy for off-roading. And like I said at the beginning of this video, this one has the solar charging roof, so you do not get a panoramic moonroof. I would rather have the panoramic sunroof myself instead of the solar charger, but it just depends on personal preference. Now I think it's time to drive this thing. So again, this thing has actually been very impressive to drive because my expectations of Priuses of yesteryear, at least in terms of performance, have always been low, but this one has exceeded my expectations in many ways, more than just one. But first we're going to see how the power is, and it's quite shocking. Of course it's not going to blow you away or anything like that, but now, I know it doesn't sound the best, but the sound has I've actually gotten used to the sound. It's not that bad. It's very linear power, and the way how it puts its power down is very worth it. And you can kind of give it gas into corners. It does groan a lot, but I mean, it is a Prius. At first I did have to shift my perspective of what I thought of this car, but it's actually very good power, especially I've been driving with a heavy foot sometimes and I'll still get 50 mpg. Like as I put my foot into it here, I'm just in normal mode too. When you're normally accelerating, this is what it sounds like. The engine is pretty muted when you're normally driving it, so it isn't that groany and bad. It does get loud when you're really winding it out, and it does feel like you're squeezing the power out of it. But it does accelerate, and it really does get out of its own way impressively well. Something that I really do like about this is that it has front cross traffic alert in addition to rear cross traffic alert. And for blind corners, you just have to hope and pray that you have enough power, which it was just chirping. It's very useful. This does offer regen braking, but it only works when it wants to. It works when there's a car in front of you. Toyota calls it predictive regen braking, and it does work. I just wish that I could have it set to work all the time. In terms of the other driving modes, I mean, most of the time I keep this in normal mode because I really don't notice a difference between normal and sport in this car. Eco mode, you do notice a difference because it dulls the throttle response a little bit and you can feel it cuts power a little bit to maximize efficiency, which makes it drive very nicely. And right now, because the electric battery is low, I can't drive it in purely EV mode unless if the car decides to, but it defaults to hybrid mode. So it uses the electric motor and the gas engine in conjunction, and you'll hear the gas engine cut off and cut on, and then you'll go into EV mode. And it's very seamless when you're doing this too. You barely notice it. This also has a very nice ride, especially considering that it's on the larger 19-inch wheels. It rides very smooth. You do notice the bigger wheels on some big bumps, but it's not that bad. Now, as we get onto the highway, let's see merging power. It's very impressive. Passing power on the highway is extremely impressive. You'll be surprised how quick this thing gets up to 80. And as you can see on the highway, it is a little bit loud. You do hear road noise and wind noise, but it's not that bad. We can still have a fairly quiet conversation in here, and you do hear the engine kick in every once in a while, but on the highway especially, it's not that loud. Now that this corner is dry, we can actually see how it handles. This is an off-ramp, and at speed, it's actually very composed, and you can feel the I'm actually very surprised with how it's gripping, and you can feel the the electric motors pull the car around and make it pivot a bit. Of course, it's not that sporty, but it is very dynamic for being a Prius. Passing power, it's really not bad. This is, to me, one of the most drivable Priuses, and it's one of the least dreadful Priuses to drive. I wouldn't even say this is really dreadful because it has good power, and it's actually been kind of fun to drive. And that, my friends, brings us to the conclusion of this video. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I actually really enjoyed my week with the Prius Prime. I quite enjoyed the MPGs, and it's also very nice to drive this thing around in EV mode as well. The power is impressive, the efficiency is impressive, the driving dynamics are very impressive. I really cannot say anything bad about the Prius Prime, and if you're looking at one of these, you should absolutely get it. This car really does sell itself, but let me know in the comments if you have a new body Prius at home, if you have a normal Prius or a Prius Prime. Again, I hope you enjoyed this detailed look at the all-new Toyota Prius Prime, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. And thank you all for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, peeps.